Hello and welcome to MalMakes. Today we're doing a painting based on Vine Valley from Donkey Kong Country. This is the full version. If you're interested in the time-lapse, you can click on the card here. Otherwise, let's get started. I think Vine Valley has to be my favorite map in the game. It's absolutely gorgeous on the map screen. Normally you don't quite see it here because you see the left side, and then when you cross the bridge then you see the right side, but I think it's really nice to have the sun right in the middle. So that's what I want to do for my painting. I had split this square up into 16 pieces in half and then in half again both directions, so I could see where the exact center was and just get a good idea of where all of the vertices for these intersections were. Now the very center of my sketch is right here, with horizon being a little bit below it and the sun being a little bit above, right on the center line for left and right. That'll help me figure out where everything else is going to go, because that's really the most important thing, of where the sun is and where the horizon is. So I'm going to mark in that spot so I know where horizon is going to be eventually, and I'll start painting the sky first, and once that dries I can go into painting those clouds. I know I talked about it in one of my more recent paintings, but I feel like every time I paint a sky I have to do it twice just to make sure I like it, and the radial gradient didn't work right here. I was rushing through it, and trying to do a complementary color gradient was very difficult, so I decided to paint it a second time, and I'm going to do it as a vertical gradient going from light to dark this way instead of from the center outwards. Because I still wanted to be kind of light down here, it was just being very difficult, and I think doing the vertical from light to dark will be a lot easier. Plus there's going to be a lot of clouds in the sky and a lot of different things that cover up some of the edges, so it's not going to matter anyway, it's going to get covered up in the end. So a vertical gradient is going to be a lot easier and faster. But I did want to talk about my color choice. I tried a bunch of different pigments because yellow in particular is very difficult to make dark, like a dark yellow. A lot of the time if you mix it with black paint, you get a green, like you can see in some of these here, they get a bit green. So I had to try different pigments because they will all do something different with each color. And I tried 6 different ways to make them darker or desaturated, to try something different. Some of them were just too warm, some of them got too dark too quickly, so there were a lot of different things I had to look at. Out of my 4 pigments, I liked the bismuth yellow best. It was very lemony color and it wasn't too warm, unlike the Hansa here. So then I had to look at the bismuth with the different colors I tried for making it darker, and I really liked the Dioxine purple and I liked the neutral gray number 5, so I thought I would mix them, and I really liked how that looked, so I did a big sample of it down here. So this is going to be my gradient for the sky, starting with here down by the horizon, and then the top of the canvas getting more into this violet color. So I'm just going to repaint over the sky and we'll be set to move on. Having drawn everything in, I worked on the water. I really wanted to work on the sky, but it was still wet. It really needed a day and a half or so to cure fully before I could do anything else to it. And that was because I used Golden Open paint for the yellow. The rest were done with regular heavy body paints that look like this, and these dry a lot quicker than the Golden Open. And they're called Golden Open because it refers to how long the paint is wet for. If you think of a window being open, that's the window of how long you have to paint with the paint before it dries and that window closes. Whereas this paint dries a lot quicker, its open time is a lot shorter than the Golden Open paint. I like to use at least one of these when I do the gradient because it makes it mix better because it stays wet longer and it isn't drying on my brush and my canvas on my palette as fast as if I didn't use it at all. So I worked on the sky, let that dry, and then because I couldn't do anything, I worked on the water. Now I used Prussian blue, Payne's gray, ultramarine blue, and white to fill in all of the blue areas. And I know it needs to get to yellow because it's going to reflect the sun and reflect the sky down into the water, at least wherever the shoreline isn't casting a shadow on the water. And because it's yellow on top of blue, I didn't want it to turn green. And in a few spaces, it gets a little bit green, but it's not bad. And the way I got around that was using neutral gray number 5. Once I finished all of the blue parts of the water, I used neutral gray to bring in some areas where I'm going to end up having the yellow. And you can still see some of that in these areas. It does look a bit yellow on top of the blue, but that was perfect because I was going to build yellow on top of those areas anyway. And once I had all of the gray down, I could go back into using some of the bismuth because I'm using the same sky color, into lighter and lighter colors of more and more titanium white until I just have some sparkles on the top of the ripples using pure titanium white. I thought about where the shoreline would cast shadows on the water and the bridge is going to cast a shadow wherever it's going to sit above. So I thought about that and where I had drawn things as I filled these different colors in. But now that this is done and the sky is dry, I can go ahead and finish those clouds. I've been working on the mid-ground areas for the painting, bringing in different browns to make them look like rocks. I need to bring in a lot of greenery yet because this area does have a lot of green, but I wanted to get the rocks painted in first and then start to bring in some grass and the trees and the various details. I started to paint Funky's flights, and there's signs right here once you go visit him that talk about the flights and such, but I thought it would be more fun to make them a little bit more surfboard shaped because it's Funky Kong. I still need to put the sign in and the windsock, but mostly his little Funky's Flights location is done here. I started to look at this, and the images you have for Donkey Kong Country are very small in resolution. It would be really cool someday if they released the full-size image for these, but I didn't think about what I was looking at. I just thought, oh, it's a roller coaster or a minecart or something. And when I looked at the full image and zoomed in and looked at everything after I started painting this, I realized it's a bridge because it continues the rest of the bridge throughout the piece. And I'm just going to fix that by changing it a little bit, but do know that was my first thought, and I am looking at that and I'm going to fix it at some point after I work on some of the other rocks. Now I've had to do 2 layers of the dark brown that I was using for the burnt umber to fill this in because it was a little transparent, but I am going to continue using some of my lighter browns into some of the yellows to bring the rock texture in here. And this side over here, because it does sit in direct line of the sun, will have a lot more of the lighter colors because it gets lit up by that. So I'm gonna fill all that in, and then I'll probably work on some of the greenery to bring that in before I do more of the small details like the sign and the trees and fixing the bridge. I've been filling in a lot of small things, like all of the greenery down here that's on the ground. I just used sap green, some of my bismuth yellow that I had used for the sky, and titanium white, starting with the darkest sap green down here, filling in everything with that, and then working lighter, and then lighter, and then lighter with more yellow and more white until I get just the highlight that's closest to the sun. Now, I'm not done with this tree here that has the really big trunk with the bridge that goes off this way, but I did block it in with carbon black and burnt umber just so I knew where it was going to be. I did the same for the trunks of all the other trees. They're going to get mostly covered up by greenery because they're pine trees, but for now that just helps me figure out exactly where they're going to go, and I can see the triangle shape of where their needles are. Right now I'm working on the temple, filling in these columns, and the temple has been kind of a pain because it has such straight lines, and I'm using this gold color to blend from the darkest side of each column to the lightest side. It's my mid-tone, and then I'll mix it up with more titanium white and paint the lightest side that's currently white. That was just there so I could mark where it was going to be. But then the temple will be done, and most of this side over here will be all set. I've been painting the trees over on this side, and the pine trees were done with the Bob Ross fan brush technique, where I just tap a little bit towards the top, zigzagging back and forth all the way down using the fan brush flat against the canvas. I used a carbon black sap green for the first layer, and I'm going to be mixing lighter and lighter greens like I have for the grass on the right side of each pine tree where it's closest to the sun. Then those will be set. I also worked on the big tree trunks. There's one here and then one around the corner, and they get little platforms and bridges, so that's something else I have to work on. And I've been debating exactly what I want to do with Funky's flight cabin right here. I filled in the windsock, and I'm not sure I want to do the sign on top. I think it will start bringing too much detail, too much attention to this, and I want to keep it a little muted here in the background. Because I had already turned the signs on the sides of the door into little surfboards, I don't really want to do any more to that. I think it's just going to bring too much focus to this area. So I've let my fan brush dry after doing these pine trees, and now I can start to do those highlights I was talking about. I finally decided on a size for the sun. I had started with something that was way too big, and I had just kept cutting rings off my circle until I liked how big it was. Traced it, filled it in with titanium white, and with it filled in titanium white, I could see it was way too bright and was bringing way too much attention to itself, so I'm just blocking it in with a very light yellow, the same light yellow I've used for the sky with just more white in it, so it's just a little bit lighter and still looks like the sun. And I'm just going to fill in this entire thing so it just brings it into the background a little bit, a little less attention getting than it had been. There's only a few small things left to do. I've been working on these little platforms and bridges on these trees, drawing in the main bridge right here, and then working on the banana pile for the island. Now for the banana pile, I started by blocking it in with dark greens, working my way into yellow and lighter greens, just doing these crescent moon shapes for the bananas and filling that whole area. After I got to like solid saturated yellow and light yellow, the banana horde started to look really good, and now I'm working on the bridges and the platforms, trying to make them look more like wood and like they belong instead of this solid carbon black that's here on the canvas. So I'm using burnt umber with some titanium white just to make some lighter browns and going back and forth until I'm happy with how light the brown is, and starting to add some detail on these platforms and bridges. Whatever side is closest to the sun is going to get those highlights, so I'm going to mix more white into that brown there, and then less into the area where there's going to be shadow, just because that area is not going to get as light with the rest of it, so it'll make it look 3D. So I'm doing that for these little things over here and then the main bridge, and then it's pretty much done. I'm working on the main bridge next, and I started to roughly draw where all of my planks are going to go for the bridge, and I'm not super happy with how the bridge is so far. I blocked it in with the carbon black and the paint marker, and there's a little bit of a rough texture on my canvas, so when you're drawing with the paint marker, sometimes you get these little bumps in where you're trying to draw, or it'll splatter a little bit of paint everywhere else, and that sort of happened on my rails, so I'm not super happy with them, but I think that once I start to add the brown, it'll hide some of that and it'll look a bit more normal like it should. So I'm going to still fill that in just like I am over here with these other browns, starting with the dark color and filling in like most of the planks, working my way into lighter and lighter burnt umbers to do the highlights, and then I think it'll all come together. Some of the things that bother me yet are the transition between the water and the stone. It doesn't look like they're supposed to be touching. They look like they're just hitting against each other, and it doesn't look like they should connect and be one picture. So I'm going to take some of my lighter blues and go along the very edge of the water line to lighten that up right there where some waves would hit the edge of the stone, just to connect them and make them look like one entire painting. I'm also going to take some shading gray and just darken any areas where I feel need to be a little bit darker, just to push those back and tone those areas down. And we're done! We have Vine Valley from Donkey Kong Country. If you're interested in this piece, you could buy a poster or a phone case, or bid on this original canvas. There's links down below. Also, consider supporting me on Patreon. You can find out more at supportmal.com. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of MalMakes, and I'll see you again here for another video game painting.